for this afternoon and tonight, a significant winter storm, including heavy snow with limited drinking.
Hello, and welcome to the Snowbrains podcast, where it's my job to interview the most intelligent people in the snow sports industry and pass their fascinating knowledge on to you, our listeners. I'm your host, Miles Clark. I'm a professional free skier, a mountain guide, an Alaska heli ski guide, a UC Berkeley molecular cell biology graduate, the founder and CEO of Snowbrains, and I'm just starting my 25th consecutive full ski season in North America. I've also done 14 full ski seasons in South America. I started skiing full ski seasons just after graduating college at 22 years old. Damn, I must be getting old. This episode of the Snowbrains podcast is brought to you by Club Med. Are you ready for an unforgettable ski getaway that takes care of everything? And I mean everything. Head to one of Club Med's mountain resorts where you can experience the thrill of the slopes without worrying about a thing. With their all-inclusive packages, you'll get all your lift tickets, ski passes, ski and snowboard lessons for all ages and ski levels, delicious meals, exciting après-ski activities, and even childcare for the kids, all included in the price. So you can focus on what matters most, carving perfect turns and enjoying the breathtaking views. Visit www.clubmed.us or call 1-800-CLUB-MED or call your travel advisor to book your ski escape today. My guest today is Chris Tomer. Chris is an Emmy Award-Winning meteorologist with over 20 years of weather forecasting experience. He's also an avid backcountry skier and mountaineer, having climbed all 54 of Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks. Chris serves as an on-air host and meteorologist for KDVR Fox 31 Denver and KWGN CW, Colorado's own Channel 2. A position he's held since 2005. Chris is known for his specialized expertise in mountain weather. He's become a trusted resource for climbers and skiers around the globe, providing tailored forecasts that have aided more than 200 teams and their ascents of some of the world's most challenging peaks, including Mount Everest and the second tallest peak in the world, K2. As CEO of Tomer Weather Solutions and a prominent on-air host for KDVR and Fox 31 Denver, Chris combines his passion for meteorology with his love for the outdoors, ensuring that adventurers can navigate the elements safely. And I personally watch his YouTube channel for the best mountain weather every single morning. Hello, Chris. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being here. You're our first real celebrity on the show. How are you feeling?
I use that term loosely, Miles, but
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on. Love what you guys are doing over there at Snowbrains. And I mean, this is the world that I live in and I love. And thanks for supporting me along the way as well.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for the kind words. When did you ski last?
Last week, I went up and I am a ski mountaineer. So I went up into the backcountry here in Colorado. I went up to maybe 13,000.
Wow.
And there was more snow than I thought we would have for this time of the year. But now we have a really strong storm moving in here today and with feet of accumulation. But I was up there last week. It was interesting.
So do you have a ski pass or are you just backcountry only?
You know, I used to have a pass. I don't generally anymore. I do a lot of backcountry. Occasionally, I'll go to a resort. I've got a couple friends. I've got one up at Loveland ski area, so I'll go there a lot. My other really good friend is a ski instructor and a mountaineer and a guide up at Vail. So I'll go up there sometimes to Vail. But those are kind of the two resorts that I hit if I'm going to do it.
I was going to save this question, but let's do it now. How insane is I-70 now? Is it as bad as the videos and everything makes it look?
It's honestly, it's worse because you see the pictures, but it's really the mental part of the whole thing because you worry about it constantly for days and you know it's going to snow hard and the traffic's going to be bad. It's like, well, when do I got to leave to get up there? And how can I get back on time? And it's really the big limiting factor in Colorado right now. And prices being so high for everything. And you add I-70 on top of it. It's one of those things. It's really tough for people to negotiate right now.
I can't help but laugh because I feel like, so many of us are going through this in our own little microcosm in some way, but I-70 seems to be the most powerful of them all. So just for our listeners,
if you can't access it, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. And if you arrive at a ski resort in a terrible mental state, also maybe what's the point, right? So it's like, the whole idea is to kind of get this taste of freedom and open air and all that, and you're not really getting that. So just for our listeners, really quick, we don't need to stay on this. So I-70 is in Colorado, basically goes from Denver up to the ski resorts. Tell us a little bit about I-70.
Yeah, so it's the main artery, right? If you were to say, where does the biggest population center in Colorado live and where are the mountains? I-70 connects both those things. So it's a lot like trying to push a brick through sand. It's like all of this volume has to flow through this corridor back and forth that just oscillates all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem, and I found this to be the case many years ago before I skiing the backcountry, you go to a resort, they all open at the same time. So everybody's trying to shoot for the same time. Then lunchtime rolls around, you're already worrying about the return trip home. So it's this constant worry. And I think that's why a lot of people have taken to the backcountry here in Colorado, because you sort of escape that timeline. You're not locked into, okay, the resort opens at 8 and it closes at 3 or whatever it is. And that sort of opens up new doors. And one of the solutions here is that, and a lot of people do own second properties here. You go up and you stay. You stay through the madness and then you come home afterwards. But that's not a reality for a lot of people, though.
For the majority of people, I argue. But, well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and it is just, it's hard to do anything but laugh because there's just not a lot of good solutions. Skiing and riding is more popular than ever, and we still
I think that may be, there may be an I-70 for a lot of places. Like, up in Utah, it's Little Cottonwood Canyon, or it's California, it's coming up over Donner or whatever it might, or coming out of Reno. Who knows? But I think every place could have its own I-70.
Oh, yeah. And so, and just really quick again, where do you go backcountry skiing, or do you want to not share that kind of stuff?
No, I don't care. I go all over the place, honestly.
Okay.
I have a few places that I hit all the time up on the Continental Divide, like between Winter Park and Loveland and A Basin. But then there are times when I'll go with my friend John. The guy just knows everything. He's from Colorado, and so he'll take me to places I've never even been before, and that are big projects, long days. And honestly, I've been all over in Colorado. I've climbed all the high peaks. I ski in the winter, but those are kind of the hot spots for me. If I don't have much time, it's close to Denver.
That makes sense. Yeah. And how many days did you ski last winter? And what are your ski days? Because I know you work a lot.
Yeah, I try to get out at least once a week. So, I mean, that's quite a bit. I don't know how many days that is, but it's quite a bit.
It adds up.
Some days, 2 days a week, depending on if we get a powder day. Yeah, I work Monday through Friday, so I'm stuck on that weekend, routine. Occasionally I'll get out during the week, but mainly it's be out on Saturdays and Sundays.
That makes sense. Well, Chris, I really want to dig into your incredible mountain weather forecasting, your mountaineering passion. I think is really interesting. I don't know of any other mountain or weather people that do that. And what it's like being a weatherman in 2024. I think there's some really interesting innuendo here. But to start real quick, could you give us your life story? I usually ask for like a 3-minute life story, but if it goes over that, no problem.
Yeah, so there's a lot in this.
Good.
So I grew up in Ohio. But my parents would always come out here to Colorado and ski for like 2 weeks. They'd take these long trips. So I think it's just sort of ingrained in me growing up, expecting to go skiing. And they would always go to certain places like Breck and Steamboat and Snowmass. So I go there a lot, when I can. So I did that. And then I always had this love and fascination for weather and why things were happening. I wanted to know why it was snowing. So I decided to go to college for meteorology. I went to Valparaiso University, which is near Chicago. Made some great friends.
And you played hoops there.
And played some hoops there.
You were not going to say that. That's my favorite part of your story, but continue.
Yeah, I did. And now I don't want to mislead you. I was not good. I was not a starter. I was a practice player, but
still, man, that's so cool.
That was fun.
I grew up playing hoops. I love hoops. So
then you know all about the feeling of playing hoops.
So,
and that's where I met, who's probably my best friend, John Kudrowski. And he lives in Vail, and he was out there studying geography. Well, anyway, the two of us, we just became really good friends. We roomed together, and we would travel back and forth from Colorado. We would climb and ski, and I just really fell in love with that lifestyle. So my goal coming out of college was to get a weather job in Colorado, and I did. I landed it in Grand Junction, and that was a fun couple years, built my resume up, and eventually landed in Denver, and I've been here ever since, over 20 years. And that's allowed me to do pretty much everything that I do. But John is a guide around the world. And back in like 2002, he was taking some people up to Denali, and he's like, man, I could really use some weather forecasts while I'm up there to get these people up and down. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. And how can we communicate? And back then it was, he had to stand out at the edge of 14 camp to get a cell signal. So, we would communicate, but that was the start for me of professional forecasting for mountaineers and skiers around the world. And honestly, it's
And what year was that? Sorry.
That was like 02.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. Wow.
And it's just grown so much over the last 20 years. I've never advertised, really. It's just been word of mouth, honestly. And now I have clients and mountaineers and people that hire me every single month of the year for crazy projects, speed records, FKTs, climbing Everest, K2, Denali, whatever it is. I've worked with everybody with high success. It's been an incredible ride. And the thing about me is that I actually practice what I preach, right? I go out and I'm in the weather. I'm in skiing. I'm climbing all the time. So it's like I'm able to kind of see what the data says, and I can see what reality is. And so I can kind of match those two up. And so I've been doing that for a long time. I mean, that's kind of a side thing. I also work in television, but I love that part of what I do a lot. And it's grown. Like now I try to do these YouTube video forecasts that people seem to like. And
they're so good.
Thank you. And that channel has grown a lot. And so I try to do that during ski season. And I really enjoy that. I think I kind of live vicariously through it because I can't travel. I can't powder chase. Like I can't go to Alta tomorrow and ski Santa Fe tomorrow and Jackson. And I don't have time, but I know people that do. And I know, Miles, that you do a lot of that. If I could, I would do that. I think that's got to be one of the most exhilarating things, to hit the powder day perfectly, right? And you know what? There are some people who work 9-to-5 jobs who have limited time and who do take some vacation time to do just that. And I know those people. And when you can give them a forecast and they hit the perfect powder day, like 3 days in a row at different resorts, man, that's the payoff. That's quite a feeling right there.
It's invaluable. And I'm one of them. I use your forecast to do exactly that all the time. And your YouTube forecasts are terrific. If people haven't seen that, look Chris Tomer up on YouTube. They're sometimes twice a day. It's ridiculous. What's good is it makes me feel better. It seems like it's easy for you. You seem very casual. I mean, you're obviously comfortable doing these kind of presentations. It seems like for anybody else, that would be so much work. So we really appreciate you doing that.
It is. I mean, I won't kid you. I mean, it is a fair amount of work, but I'd be doing it anyway, honestly. I follow the weather every day. I have to just for my job, but my real passion is mountain meteorology. And so I'm constantly following that. And so there's always people that want to know what's going to happen. And so that I just kind of take the data and my thoughts and I put them into the YouTube videos and it works. I try to be clear and concise, and I think it works.
It definitely works, especially, I love all of the nitty-gritty nerdy stuff. Yeah. Like somewhere around the middle towards the end of your videos, you have just the raw numbers.
Right, of course.
And you really hit the hot spots. So you really talk about Tahoe, Oregon, Washington, hit the good spots in Idaho, a little bit of Montana, always hit Jackson Hole. And then obviously you really cover Colorado, New Mexico, hopefully, and then out here in the Wasatch in Utah as well. So, if you're a Western skier, and then at the end, you always hit the Northeast too. So yeah, I feel like if you're any kind of skier, but especially if you're out in the West, because we get so much snow and it's so critical to know where it's happening and when it's happening. Really valuable.
Look
it's really
right
helpful.
Now. I mean, the storm, we're at the tail end of this atmospheric river and it's pushing through Utah. I'm a little interested in Utah right now. The flow is maybe not quite what we thought it was.
It's not turning up. Yeah.
Right now. But it is in Colorado. I mean, we're just getting nailed in parts of the Western Slope right now. So it's those kind of little kinks that really interest me. Like, why is it not generating big snow right now in the Watson? And it still might. I mean, we still have the rest of the day to go. But, that kind of stuff fascinates me.
Which is funny for our listeners. We were scheduled for 1 p.m. Mountain Time, and we bumped forward to 11. So I could, after this podcast, zip over to Alta and try to. My favorite thing in Utah is an Alta storm day afternoon. I usually show up at like 1 or 2. They're open till 4:30, and there's nobody there. It's dark and stormy, and you can just get all the powder you need. The next day when it's sunny, it's a madhouse. But if you do these storm days, it's amazing.
When you go up there on the storm days, do you have a route that you like to hit right away?
Oh, my first run?
Yeah.
I don't know Alta well enough. So if I was going to answer that question, honestly, I like to ski right under the chair on the Collins chair. There's like this really great slope. It's got some moguls so you can kind of pop and get little mini airs and just, it's just a really fun, I'm not super creative when I get to Alta. I just love to ski that Collins chair over and over. It's a world-class chair. It's 1,800 vertical feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 1800 vert, super high speed, and you can just get so many laps. And because it's so fast, especially afternoon on a storm day, there's just no lines.
Nice.
It's awesome. And then if there is a line, you got Wildcat, the little slow chair right next to it. So you never have to wait in line basically at Alta,
That's
which
beautiful.
I really, it is, right? And
Yeah.
especially in this day and age. And you mentioned these kind of, I say hardcore snow forecasts or weather forecasts for
Mhm.
high altitude mountaineering. And I was just reading online, and this could be totally off, but it sounds like in the past 10 years, you've put over 50 teams on summits on the world's tallest mountains, including Everest,
Mhm.
K2. People probably understand, but lives are at stake up high weather-wise. And I'm just a little bit curious about, how do you forecast for these? What tools do you use? And do you feel a lot of pressure?
When I first started out, there was a lot of pressure because I
Mhm.
really didn't know what tools were best. Tools are different for every mountain. So let me explain this. Let me get into this because you sort of quoted maybe 50 teams. It's honestly thousands of clients. I mean, over the
Way
years.
past that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from every peak you can imagine, I've worked them all. I've unnamed peaks, unclimbed peaks, new lines, FKTs, fast teams, slow teams. So many stories of different levels of risk tolerance for these teams. So
That's a lot of
all of
innuendo
that
right there.
factors into how I forecast for these folks. So let me just give you an example. Most of my business comes from Denali, people going up to climb Denali by different routes and ski
Mhm.
Denali by different routes. That mountain has the worst weather on Earth. It
So
has the
bad.
coldest temperatures, it has the most wind, and it has the most snow. Consistently, all of those variables have to be considered. So my goal is to communicate with the clients ahead of time and say, hey, this is how I'm going to do things. I'm going to send in-reach messages or whatever. It used to be satellite phones, but you don't even
Mhm.
need them anymore. So that's how I do it. I say, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. These are concise forecasts. We'll talk about summit windows, talk about whether to watch out for on rotations, and what's your ideal type of conditions. Where are you going to ski from? Are you going to use the 17 camp? Are you going up the rib or
Mhm.
whatever it is? So I have to take into account all those things when I'm forecasting. And there's so many different tools, different models. When I talk to a team, I want to know immediately, tell me what you're seeing now. Tell me what the weather is, what the wind is where you're at, and if there's any snow falling, and roughly what the temperature is, because then I want to take that information and I want to compare it to some of the model guidance that I might be looking at. What's close to the actual conditions? And it may change over time, but there's so many different models available over the web, from the American to Euro to, honestly, there's tons of different ones. But it depends on what you're seeing on the mountain. That's how you decide what you're going to use.
Mhm.
What's performing well up until now, and what will be performing well into the future. And then that gives you some confidence to say, okay, folks, here's my forecast. Best time to go for the summit is in 2 days. You got a summit before 10 a.m. The wind increases in the afternoon, whatever it
Mhm.
is. I try to be as specific as I can. And a lot of the time, the best part of it is I can tell you what weather to avoid, right? So there are plenty of
Mhm.
good days, but if I can tell you what days to avoid, then it keeps you out of danger. It lowers the overall risk for the team. And like I said, it may be different for every team. I've worked with so many guys that will say, hey, I'm going to stay home. I've got 3 days off, but I'm going to stay home and I'm going to buy my plane ticket when you tell me I can go up and hit Denali and climb it in 2 days or whatever it is.
Right.
And they'll wait at home and I'll say, okay, we've got a 2-day window coming up. They'll buy their ticket, fly up, get on the glacier, go in on skis and climb it in like 48 to 72 hours, and then they're out.
Whoa.
A lot of people don't have time to go up for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or whatever it is. So
Right.
that's an interesting new trend as well, is just people going up fast. So, that's Denali, but every single mountain is different. And on Everest, all about the jet stream. And,
Mhm.
there's roughly 11 days in May when most people summit and you can go up and stand on the summit. So it's like all about forecasting wind. But the bottom line is doing that can be stressful, yes. And I hit and miss just like everybody else. There are
Mhm.
forecasts that I get wrong. I can remember all of them, in fact. That's the thing. When you don't get it right, you remember them. And so that has really, I think, forced me to get better. It's honed my skills. And now I can just quickly look at data and tell you Powder Day in Jackson Hole tomorrow, whatever it is. That's made me into who I am today.
And it's so interesting, like the complexities of it must be endless because you can't just lean on a certain model or a certain way that worked
Not
last
all the
time, even
time.
because, like you said, when you get the feedback from the mountaineers on the ground, you might say, all right, now the X model's not working. I got to switch to the
Yes,
Euro or whatever.
100%.
And then I think it's really interesting too to think about, old mountain climbing and even maybe mountain climbing 20 years ago didn't have this kind of stuff. I mean, I climbed Denali in 2009. And I don't remember having good forecasts. I just remember every evening at 8 o'clock, the Rangers got on and gave you the next day's weather.
So this is the thing about Denali.
Uh-huh.
You can go up there and you can look at the Park Service forecasts.
Okay.
They just come straight from the Weather Service up there in Alaska,
Mm-hmm.
and they're okay, right?
Okay.
They're okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really want to take that to the next level, then you hire someone like me. And I've got the track record to prove that. I've got people going up when everybody else who follows the Park Service forecasts are coming down.
Oh, interesting.
You can avoid all of the summit fever, the summit crowds. I can maneuver through all of that kind of stuff. And so it's a whole new world up there.
Wow, that's exciting because I remember we got pinned at 14 camp for 10 days.
Oh, sure.
And and it was just wind, perfectly sunny, windy. Your clients are like, why aren't we going up there? So yeah, there's all kinds of crazy weather up there that could keep people off. Yeah, well, thank you. I did that trip once, and that was it. And then they called me the next year. You want to do that again? I was like, that's a lot of work.
It is a ton of work.
You really didn't pay me that well, as I remember it. So it's hard to find this motivation. Maybe if
You
the
were on
dollar.
skis, I take
No,
it.
I wish I was on skis.
Okay.
I was guiding for Rainier Mountaineering Incorporated.
Oh, RMI?
Yeah, you might even do forecasts for them now. So yeah, we're just walking. But so I do have to go back and ski it. So, and if I do, I'll definitely get your forecast because
Okay.
it would be nice to have
Yeah.
that sort of a huge benefit up there. And so I don't know, I have some kind of funny questions for you here that I think I guess the first one you can be concise, like how the hell does someone become a weatherman? Because it's sort of this combination of being like a news anchor and obviously a scientist, and it's just not normal. And it seems hard, right? Like people want to be on TV. You don't just step into this.
Well, okay, so there's a weird thing about me in that I really like what I do, but I don't see myself on television as like, okay, that's who I am. That's like half my life, and the mountain weather and the skiing and the forecasting, like that's kind of more how I see myself is off television. But yeah, I mean, it's a competitive industry. I went to school for meteorology. Not everybody does that's on television. You'll find that out.
Oh, interesting.
I don't even know what the percentage is, but some just read it from the Weather Service and
They just read the teleprompter.
okay, that's fine. Whatever it takes if that's what's happening, but that's just not who I am. But yeah, I mean, it's competitive. I've been at this station now for 20 years, so a long time.
Congrats.
But, and in the other world where I'm a mountain meteorologist, there's only a handful of people like me around the world, believe it or not. And I know many of them who do the kind of forecasting for extreme environments. There's only a few. And you were just in Antarctica. Colin O'Brady?
I don't.
He does a lot of speed stuff. He's been trying to ski the South Pole, doing like an FKT. I've worked for him down there. And
Wow.
so I've gotten to know Antarctica just a little bit, worked for people up in, like Greenland and all those places skiing. And so that's more of sort of my interest is I kind of look at television like, okay, it's interesting, it pays the bills, but I really like the intricate part of mountain meteorology.
This is a question I'm just thinking of on the fly. If you could construct your ideal job, and maybe this would have, maybe like I've constructed avenues and windows for you to get out and ski and mountaineer more, what does your perfect job look like? In a perfect world where you create what you want to do? Because you still want to have the meaningful work, but it'd be nice to be able to recreate more. I'm curious.
I haven't done it yet, but I've envisioned it. I would I had the opportunity 2 years ago to go down to Antarctica and be a forecaster down at, I forget what station it was.
McMurdo's the big one.
Probably McMurdo.
Yeah.
To work for a company that does that down there for everybody, the planes and everything else. I just didn't have the time. I was still locked in here. But I thought at the time, wow, that would really be like a dream job to go down, be in it, be forecasting it, be seeing it. And so I think maybe going to Denali or Everest and being at base camp and doing like a forecast from there and getting feedback from teams and something like that, I think would be really interesting. Going up and working for a ski area and being full-time forecaster, like at Silverton Mount, for example, which might be a really good relationship. I used to know the owners down there. I'd maybe go work at a place like that or just something down that avenue.
That's really cool. I think that's not the answer I expected. So really cool to hear that you want to be in the field, boots on the
Yeah.
ground. I like that. I am curious. There are formal answers to these questions, and that's not what I'm looking for.
Okay.
So I don't want to put you in a box or, I want you to think as outside the box or just inside your own head. And maybe just from what you've seen in your career.
Sure.
Without thinking too much, just in your opinion, kind of thinking ski town, ski resort. Who gets the most snow in North America?
Well, they get a ton of snow in California during big years. Alta pushed 1,000, was 900 to 1,000. There's a spot in western Colorado around Irwin that can go 500 or 600. Pacific Northwest almost always sees big numbers,
Mm-hmm.
Those areas all come to mind. I mean, Mammoth had that giant year, Alta, Snowbird, parts of the Elk Range in Colorado, and then the Pacific Northwest. Of course, Alaska, but those are the
Yeah.
areas that sort of come to mind.
Awesome. So I love hearing this kind of stuff. This is what gets people going. And then who gets the driest snow in North America?
Okay, so we're talking like snow ratios,
Yeah, maybe you can explain
snow
how
quality.
you see this.
Snow quality.
When I ski in Utah and it's a little bit heavy,
Yeah.
and people ask, "Where are you from?" Like, "Oh, I'm from Tahoe." And they're like, "Oh, you're used to this crap."
Yeah.
And it's like, geez,
course.
guys, like it just shots fired. People care about this,
They
man.
do.
And I get it all the time being from Tahoe because now I spend a lot of time in the Rockies. I just get blasted for snow quality. So I don't know what the right way to say it is. It dry snow, good snow? I'd rather hear your thoughts because you have more depth.
Well, let's go with snow density, just to
Okay.
be specific. So there's been a few studies on this over the years, and so we can kind of look at it from that angle or just personal experience, maybe merging of the two. But I have the numbers around here. But I think Alta and Snowbird, they always have the greatest snow on earth or whatever it is. I don't know what the percentage is, but typically the drier the snow, the colder the air. The colder it's temperature that drives snow density most of the time. So you need to have a colder air mass. The air temps need to be colder to drive a drier snow. So higher elevations tend to do better. And you don't want to be near an ocean because then you bring in all that ocean heat, which is what you get the Sierra cement a lot of the time, and same up in the Pacific Northwest. So you got to be interior. The Wasatch has got a perfect setup being north to south in orientation. The high Uintas can get some dry snow. Down in southwest Colorado, they can get some dry snow. I mean, the data shows that up in northern Colorado. Steamboat, they're not particularly high up, but in northern Colorado, you tend to get a lot of the cold air masses that spin in from the north, and that tends to create some real dry crystals up in that area. Tetons can have some drier snow being north in that colder air mass. Montana, for example, just going based on, colder temperatures tend to drive drier snow, and those areas tend to get the drier snow.
And is there anything else going on in Utah? Maybe just this is a little bit of a tangent, but Utah with the lake effect snow, this Cottonwood Canyons. In my short experience on this earth as a full-time skier the past 20 plus years, Utah just seems like the most consistent place. Those Cottonwood Canyons just pull snow out of the air. It doesn't matter if it's El Nino, La Nina, they seem to get the north storms, they get the south storms. And obviously there is some lake effect. How much does that add into it? I live in Park City, I'll get an inch. I go to Alta, they get 15.
I know.
So what's going on there?
I know. Yeah, I think I was forecasting maybe 8 in Park City out of this and double that up in Little Cottonwood.
Every time.
Yeah, so when you look at the factors, it is in the perfect position. You're really in a position where you're going to benefit from a southern storm track and also a northern storm track a lot of the time.
So a good latitude, basically.
It's a good latitude, right? And the geometry of the range is about perfect north to south. So you're going to get that, which is predominantly a west wind, come in and just slam up against that. Tetons in many ways are kind of like that too. It lifts the air up. And then you've got the vertical rise, which is significant.
Huge.
For both the Tetons and also the Wasatch. A lot of mountain ranges don't have that kind of vertical, the relief as it's called from the valley floor. Then you have to look at what's upstream of the range. You don't want big mountains upstream because that tends to block the flow, create some downslope type of conditions. So you got to have some clear air upstream. And that's why west-northwest winds tend to really just crank out snow in the Wasatch because you've got some clear air coming in. And then you've got to have cold air. Well, you're in a good position to rotate in cold air from the north, good lapse rates over the top of the Wasatch. Whereas in Colorado, Telluride, for example, is surrounded by big peaks. The Wilsons are a 14 conglomerate just to the west. So you can't have a west wind come in because it's going to hit that range, be blocked and downslope and dry out the air into Telluride. So Telluride has a very narrow band of wind direction that it can actually benefit from.
Do you say wind fetch? Is there a word for that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So the fetch of the air, the wind direction, all of that plays into it. And the Wasatch is wide open. Like you can have a wide range of wind directions that come in and lift the air up over the range. And I think it's something like the amount of snow in Little Cottonwood increases like 100 inch per 1,000 feet of something per 1,000 feet. Steenberg did some work on this up there. But yeah, it's like so significant. The relief, the air temp, the lapse rates, the wind direction, the geographic position, the latitude, the cold air. It's just in that perfect storm position.
It's really weird. And I'm glad you say that because that's the way it feels, at least. And so, two little factors that are anecdotal. Sometimes people talk about, oh, the desert is a huge desert all the way to California.
Yes.
It dries out the air and that makes the snow drier. It doesn't seem like that maybe is real, but I'm curious what your thoughts are. If the lake effect snow is significant in the Cottonwood Canyons, what percent benefit are we getting if you were just going to guess?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's think about this for a second. So the dry desert. So typically if the storm comes out of California, it drops off the edge of the Sierra and it kind of disappears for a while because that's what happens. That's why you have the desert right there.
The rain shadow too, right?
Exactly.
Of the Sierra.
So then what you're gonna have to need is that energy doesn't dissipate in the atmosphere. It's still, there's a signature for it. It still has to come in. Now, there's two things going on when you have snow in the Wasatch, and maybe a third with the lake. So you have the storm energy that comes in, and some of it may have dissipated coming off the Sierra. But then once you get that flow to shift, you start to get orographic snow. So the mountains create its own type of weather after a while, as long as you just rotate the wind.
And orographic for our listeners is kind of the air gets pushed up and brings the water out.
Yes.
Against the tall mountains.
Typically, whenever you force air to go up into the atmosphere, it cools, you condense it, and then you can start to form clouds and snow. So that's the mountain doing it itself. Combine that with a little bit of storm energy. I don't know that the desert really matters. As long as you've got clear air ahead of the range and you're not blocking it by taller peaks, I think that's more important. But the lake effect, I don't know what the percentage contribution is, but I know it exists. You'd have to have the right flow come off the lake and then roll up slope into the Little Cottonwood area. And I know it happens. So the lake effect kind of turns into its own orographic flow. That would be moisture-laden air coming off of the Great Salt Lake and orographic. So maybe it's a 2-in-1. Maybe that's why it's so powerful. There's a lot of little things.
And that makes sense, yeah. And people talk about how the northwest flow is great for
it's fantastic.
This area, and that goes right over the lake. So there's a little bit of a percentage. We love
that here in Colorado too. That's probably one of our best flows. If we can get a northwest flow in Colorado, we're going to nail the I-70 corridor. We're going to nail all the big areas. We're going to nail Summit County. We're going to probably nail the Continental Divide up at Loveland and A Basin and Winter Park. Doesn't typically do that well for Aspen, down to Crested Butte, but it's going to nail all that I-70 corridor.
And why northwest? Is it just the direction? It's just real simple math. It just the arrow points at the right places.
Yep, cold air. And when it comes in from the northwest, if you look at the topographic map for Colorado, there's not a lot of big mountains up in northwest Colorado. So it's clear air. It comes in, the air is relatively unfazed, and then you lift it all of a sudden up over Vail and the Gore Range and Steamboat. And that's where you get the magic, right? It's this unobstructed flow and it's cold, cold air. Typically out of the northwest, you're going to get some of your coldest air. So you're driving really dry snow at some of the prime spots.
So we want a flow to be coming basically off the Pacific Ocean, ideally, with some moisture in it. We want there to not be big mountains before it hits the mountains we want the snow to be at. So we got that northwest flow that does that for Colorado. It can do that here in the Wasatch. And the Tetons, too, I've read, maybe I even wrote an article a long time ago about the Snake River Basin, that there's a kind of a flat zone along the Snake River Basin. And so storms can go basically through Oregon and Washington, get in that basin. There's no mountains. And then they hit the Tetons, which go from probably 4,000 to 13,000. So that's probably the magic of the Tetons as well.
Yeah, and there's this great video I think the resort put together. They have some forecasters up there, and they talk about the magic of the Tetons.
Yes.
And they love that northwest flow up there. It's cold, it's dry, and they can just get that upslope, that orographic flow. And it's always interesting when you look at the differences between Grand Targhee and Jackson Hole, really in the strength, the magnitude, the velocity, the vector coming out with that northwest flow.
Yeah, well, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, why do they differ in snow and snow forecasts?
The flow has to make it up over the range.
So Targhee being on the west side's getting it for sure.
You're going to get it. And in fact, sometimes the weaker the flow, the better off they are. But if you have a decent flow, and I don't know what the critical number is, but if you have a decent flow, you can overrun the range.
And by flow, you kind of mean wind speed. Is that right?
Wind speed, exactly. You can overrun and overspill the range and it snows all the way down to the valley floor. And even better, if you can get a front that comes in on the other side of the range at the same time, you can sometimes get a bit of a merger right there over that eastern side of the range. So that northwest flow it's typically best for them.
This episode of the Snowbrains podcast is brought to you by Club Med. Calling all skiers and snowboarders, escape to the snowy peaks of Europe, Japan, China, or Canada with Club Med. There are more than 20 all-inclusive mountain resorts offer unparalleled convenience and endless adventures. Explore world-class ski resorts, indulge in authentic gourmet dining, and unwind with lively après-ski activities. Let Club Med take care of everything so you can simply relax and enjoy your ski getaway. Visit www.clubmed.us or call 1-800-CLUB-MED or call your travel advisor to discover your ski paradise.
And being a California person where we get really big storms, really big winds, the Teton has been really interesting for me. I've spent a lot of time there now since 2017, and I'll be there a bunch this winter. Is the Teton trickle is a real thing. So it's hard to figure out when to go to the Tetons for me because it's never like, oh, there's a 3-foot storm going. I'm obviously going there. It's like 2 inches tonight, 3 inches today, another inch to the next night, and then 4 inches the next day. And it's just, especially in the side country and back country, it just stacks up. And the Teton trickle is real, but it'll happen for days, which is nice. And over the course of a week, you might get a couple feet. Now, you don't get these huge jumps, but it might be better there because the avalanche danger is tricky. So getting that Teton trickle, is that something you notice in your forecast?
Absolutely. I'm thinking back to last winter. I remember some of that trickle. There was like a 4 one day, a 3-inch the next day, a 7, followed by, and there were a couple big days mixed in of like, I think it was 16 and 20, but yeah, it was like very consistent, when that flow just kind of glide over that range and it's just very consistent.
Yeah, and I mostly ski the side country, so inbounds, we ski that stuff up quick. But in the side country, it just stacks up and nobody's skiing it. And then, after a few days, you get out there and go, whoa, there was basically no snow forecast, and I'm skiing knee-deep face shots. This is awesome. I love this place. Yes. And then let's just hit the West Coast. I'm a Tahoe person, so I'm curious, what is that dynamic? Because that, like you said earlier, they get some of the most snow in the continent. Yeah. What dynamics come together there?
It's all about the moisture source, which is the entire ocean.
6,000 miles wide, right?
That's why we have glaciers up there. I mean, not only that, but the latitude in a lot of these places. You've built up such a depth of snow over the years. I mean, some of these are 1,000-inch winters, and over and over and over again in the Pacific Northwest. But yeah, so what happens is these storm systems come off just loaded with moisture. And let's just take the extreme case, the atmospheric river. That would be your most extreme situation where you're bringing in this rich flow of moisture. The jet can reach back to Hawaii and grab this and bring it in like a conveyor belt. Well, when you slam that in against the Sierra, you force it to rise up and you've got orographic snow plus storm snow. The problem is the air is really warm, and temperature drives a lot of snow density. So warmer air is going to produce a denser snow, a heavier snow. And that's what you see a lot there with high rain snow lines. So, for example, I was looking at Palisades, Tahoe, I think it was a few days ago. They were having snow, but it was mainly rain or rain snow at the base elevation. You really had to be above 7,500 feet to get the true snow. And even then, it was a pretty heavy, dense snow. I mean, we know this from skiing there intuitively, but that's what you see typically on the West. So it's this copious amounts of moisture that comes in, slams it up against the terrain features, and wrings it out in the form of heavy snow.
The heavy snow sticks to the steeps, which is where you get some of that magic, like in Alaska. And in Alaska, and maybe we're going too far into this, but the way they talk about being saran wrapped is the local anecdotal terminology. That. So it's like the snow comes in wet, it sticks. And again, take this with a grain of salt. Don't do anything dangerous, but because it's wet, you don't get so much AVI danger. And then on the ideal storm that clears out, and then at night it gets real cold because you're so far north, it pulls the moisture now out of that snow. So now it's stuck to these big steep walls. Now the moisture's been taken out. So it was wet, so it's stuck. Moisture gets taken out. Now it skis well. And that is sort of the magic of up there.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. So yeah, you got to come up there and ski with me up there too. So,
I'd
and
like
that's
to.
really weird because you'll be like, it's pouring rain in town. These peaks are only 2,000, 3,000 feet high, a lot,
Right.
6,000 at the most. Got to be gross up there. And then you get up there and it's just like this blower amazing powder as long as they get that clear, cold night. But yeah, so anyway, it's just another aside there. So who gets the wettest snow? I'm guessing
No.
kind of Washington, Oregon, California.
Yes,
Okay.
Washington, Oregon, California, for
Mhm.
sure. Sometimes on the coastal range of BC, that's still a very moist, warm flow in those areas. But yeah, and sometimes if you can get a nor'easter up in the Northeast, you can bring in some really dense type of snowfall up there too.
Ah, in the Northeast, I didn't even think about that. So just for fun, what do you think are the top three ski resorts in North America for snowfall, in your opinion? And you don't have to
Uh,
think in numbers, just like, your gut, what you see.
yeah. Well, I think you've got to include Alta and Snowbird on the list just because of the consistency. And I mean, I really do like the Tetons. That always comes to my mind. I think the
hmm
Tetons. I like the Aspen Snowmass area of
hmm
Colorado. I like those areas a lot.
That's great. Cool. Thank you for that. And so if you're a 22-year-old kid just graduated from college, you wanted to ski bum for a season, and maybe this is about you, maybe even almost too esoteric, put yourself in that mindset. Where would you go knowing what you know?
Man, even there's a part of me, I mean, and I do like Snowmass, but there's a part of me that likes Silverton, the Silverton area. So
Ooh.
maybe Silverton or up towards the Wasatch.
Does Silverton get more than an Aspen?
Yeah, they
Okay.
typically will.
hmm
Although the west side of the range around Aspen gets probably as much.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, I mean, I just like the feel of Silverton a lot. I like that feel down there. I think you could really take advantage of that. Alta Snowbird and Solitude Brighton are all fantastic. Silverton just has some bigger mountains, higher, bigger peaks around that area, a little more exploration. I think that's probably where I would lean.
Nice, man. Well, yeah, San Juan's, I actually haven't skied there. Look insane. I've seen them from the
Yeah.
plane a bunch of times.
They are,
And
and it's a huge area, like I mean,
tall.
thousands and thousands of acres and
Mhm.
so many peaks. I mean, there's probably lines that have never been skied in that area.
Yeah, and full of 14,000 foot
Yes,
peaks and a very low population, i.e., no one,
I
which
know.
is pretty cool down there too.
You don't have to deal with I-70.
No, and it looks like I have some buddies that ski down there in May when it settles out. There's no Avi danger, and it's just incredible. The skiing looks so cool, so
Yes.
fun. So to totally shift gears, well, maybe not so much because I think this is affecting our ski resorts and where it
hmm
snows and how much. How is climate change affecting snowfall in North America?
Well, it's shortening the seasons.
Mm,
So you're getting nibbled on both ends
hmm
because the temperatures, they stay warm for longer and then they're warmer. They start to warm faster on the tail end. So you're kind of compressing the season. And that's what the data shows. In fact, we've had a number of seasons that have ended abruptly here in Colorado in March. And it's like, wow, we're already melting snow. Okay. So those kind of things all factor in. And there was an interesting study that I think I did a video on a while back on how a future climate might affect the rain snow line. And this is a critical thing. It already is for Tahoe and some of these lower resorts. Lower resorts would be at more risk of a higher rain snow line in a warmer world. So places like Steamboat might want to worry about that. Tahoe, Park City, Deer Valley, those areas might be at more of a risk for rain at the base, snow at the middle part of the mountain, and snow at the top of the mountain. I mean, that's not an ideal situation for any ski resort.
Maybe we've always seen that, but in my experience, we definitely see quite a bit of rain at the bottom in Lake Tahoe. And I interviewed Randall Osterhuber a while ago, who works at the UC Berkeley Sierra Snow Lab, which I know you've heard
Oh,
of.
yeah, yeah.
And he's a really great dude. He used to be the president there and he's moved on. But he was saying just what you were saying, that we got something like 30 less freeze days per year.
Yeah,
You lose a month of winter. That's brutal.
that's a
And then
lot.
obviously, so you're getting pinched on the sides and then you're getting pinched vertically too. And then that rain snow line is
Good call.
moving up. Human caused climate change, it sounds like, get some credit for that.
Yeah, and that's just the economics of that. You lose a
hmm
month of ski season. I mean, you got to worry about your staff,
hmm
your employment costs, your housing, your snowmaking has to be brought up to a whole new level. You may have to make snow for an additional month or whatever it is. I mean, there's so much of an economic cost there aside from everything else. And that could be enough to push some resorts over the edge.
Absolutely. I think it already has. There was a story this year about a French ski resort that
Mm,
is shutting its doors because it was one of those Alps Maritime down near Monaco, kind of that southern Alps, lower elevation. And it just doesn't work anymore. And that might get some credit from climate change as well. Why do you think 99% or so of climate scientists agree that human caused climate change is real?
Well, I think if you just, we sort of knew where to look to see the first signs of this. We could see some of the collection of the gases at higher latitudes, and there were little hints along the way that, hey, if A, B, and C all played out, it's likely statistically that this is human caused or whatever. Then you can kind of look with your own eyes, right? And see, oh, okay, well, we may not get more hurricanes or whatever it is, but we may have more intense ones, and the ones that hit the land may be more intense. Those are kind of big things. So it's a combination of, we kind of know what to look for statistically along the way, and you can kind of see things here and there with your own eyes.
Well, thank you for that. And then I'll flip it back to snow forecast because I think this is a funny question. I've gotten this from other people who do weather forecasts. How picky are skiers and riders about getting the snow forecast exactly right?
Yeah, man, that's a loaded question because the resorts they want to advertise the best possible amount of snow they received. Where do they measure it? I'm not sure all the time, like where they measure it, where some of the numbers come from every day. But it's like my forecast, if I forecast a foot, like I'd love to see Loveland say, hey, we got a foot of snow, but I'm not sure. I don't know where Breck measures it. Is it different from Vail? Is it different from Snowmass? So the numbers may not match up, the forecast and then what you see advertised. But being a hardcore skier, once you get out there, you realize right away how much snow that resort got pretty quick.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you ever have trolls or people giving you a hard time about?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because we get that all the time, not just for our forecasts.
No. But I got used to that a long time ago. I mean, being on television, it's a nitpick thing, right? I mean, there's things all the time that just goes with the territory. I don't care about it anymore. And it happens all the time. Even with forecasting, you get comments. So, I mean, it just is what it is.
And it's the same thing at Snowbrains, and it hurt my feelings at first, and now it doesn't even. No, it doesn't even get close.
All it is, if you think about it, someone's just unhappy, right? They're just unhappy.
Yeah.
And it's their way of releasing that anger. That's all it is.
No, it's very true. I just read a book called The Four Agreements, and one of the agreements is don't take anything personally.
Exactly.
Because when someone gives you a negative feedback, generally it's because they're experiencing negativity. It doesn't actually have to do with you. But what does have to do with you is you've climbed all the 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado. What was that experience like? Did you ski some of them? Tell us about that, because does it take years? I mean, that's a project, man.
Yeah, I've done it. Yeah, so I think I finished in like 2009. I think I finished them all dry. I climbed them all dry. A lot of them with my good friend John. And then we went back and did a lot of them again, different routes. And then we've been skiing a lot of them now, but that's taken many years to go back and ski a lot of them. And there's plenty that I haven't. And I'm not like an extreme skier either. So I want to go home at night, every night. I'm not looking to get in a serious danger. But yeah, so it's two totally different worlds. Climbing 14ers in the summer and climbing them in the winter. I worked for a guy, Chris Fisher, here in Colorado, who actually did them all in the winter.
Oh, wow.
And that was in one winter, it was the speed record. So, yeah, I mean, climbing them really gave me an inside look at mountain weather firsthand, seeing how the weather changes at 14,000 feet. And whether you're here or anywhere around the world, the concepts are all the same. It doesn't change. The mountains are going to lift the air. You're going to get snow. You're going to get precipitation. That's a universal thing. It's all about wind direction and air temps and all that kind of stuff. So it taught me a lot of valuable lessons. And it definitely humbled me as well, because it's like, man, you can't do everything. You're not going to get every forecast right. In some situations, it's very serious working for people, and I take it very seriously. But it just taught me a lot about life, and it humbles you pretty fast.
I bet. And was it via those experiences that you were working on your segment called Tomer's Trails, which you won an Emmy Award for, by the way? Man, so I'm super curious. I think it's a big deal to win that award. And I'm curious about Tomer's Trails. What were those?
It kind of all started out with this book that we put together. It was called Sleeping on the Summits. And
yeah, tell us about that too, because that was a bestseller.
This whole summer project where we went and slept on the summits of all the 14ers in Colorado, which had never been done, and it hasn't been, because you have thunderstorms every afternoon, and so people are usually off by noon. Well, we went in the afternoons and slept on them that night and until the next morning, so you really had to get the forecast right. Then that book kind of propelled me into this idea of, well, maybe I should bring some of these stories to television. And the people at the station, the managers really liked it. And they were like, oh man, we love these stories. And so we were putting together all these stories. And yeah, I mean, they won some awards. So that was a lot of fun. It really gave my career a different dimension. That was a fun time.
And it's cool. It must have been great for you because you're obviously a meteorologist, but then you're
Yeah,
also branded as a mountain person, which
exactly.
that combination just brings some authenticity that some other people might not have.
Yeah.
And I'm also super curious, do you have any funny or scary stories from those adventures?
Oh man. I mean, what do guys think about when they're out there doing this kind of stuff all the time? It's
Mhm.
food and we would order pizzas and pick them up on the way and take them to the top. And you really get to know the other person really well. You get to know yourself. I mean, there were so many times when we failed, the weather was just too bad and we had to come back and do it another day. And it's just life compressed down into every peak is kind of the way I put it.
Well, I like it. You definitely appreciate whether you like it or not,
Yeah.
what matters in life.
Yes.
Hmm.
And when I work for these teams, I work for these clients around the world, everybody has a different dream. Everybody
Hmm.
wants a little something different out of it. Yeah, they want to get to the top and, come home, but they have
Hmm.
different goals along the way. Maybe it's the speed aspect of it, or they really just want to do it in traditional mountaineering style, or they have a team that they want to make sure everybody gets to the top. And so it's like you may forecast a perfect window for a team, but they may not take it. They may not all be ready. Part of the team may have altitude sickness or
Hmm.
they're too weak to go for the summit. And so it's like, I used to get disappointed about that. I'd be like, oh
Hmm.
man, they're going to miss the window.
Right.
But then I'm like, well, I had to put myself in their shoes. As a climber, you're not always 100%, rarely ever
Hmm.
100%. And so
Hmm.
now I have empathy for that. Now I understand that. I get that. But that's how I've sort of grown over the years, I think. You sort of accept those limitations and you learn from them.
Oh, that's great. And again, I think it adds to your authenticity that you have this insight that other folks won't have. And I think it's so interesting that you've been forecasting weather for I'm not sure how many years
Yeah, it's
now
like 20, 25.
on TV. And so you work at KDVR Fox
I do.
31 and I think also KWGN Channel
Yep.
2
Chilling.
in
Yep.
Denver.
Yep.
What's your typical day like? I
Oh,
mean, is it like, are you up at 3 a.m. and looking
well,
at models and then you have to create a script and then it's on the teleprompter, then you read it and you got to do that, what, 7 times a day?
so I worked our morning shift for a lot of my career here, which was super early. And
Hmm.
it was like I was getting up, at 2:30, 3 o'clock and coming into work
Whoa.
and getting the forecast prepared. And yeah, I had to put it in the computer system, basically. I had to build the
Hmm.
graphics and I do everything from scratch. So it was like putting
Wow.
it in there and get ready. We were on at 4:35 a.m. So I had to be ready for that. And then you go through the morning show, you kind of repeat yourself 24 times or something a morning.
Wow.
But that's a really early schedule. I don't do that now. So here's my
How many
schedule
years
now.
did you do that?
I did that for like 15 years.
Wow.
It was
That's
a
a lot.
long time
That's a
and it
lot.
took its toll. Those morning hours
Yeah.
take their toll. It's like I used to
Hmm.
joke it was like an alpine start every day.
Yeah.
And that was my only way to get through it. But
Uh,
so now my schedule is, and it kind of depends. If I'm working for people and they're across the world, the timelines are so different. So
mhm.
sometimes I'll have to get up earlier, but typically I'll be up at about 5 and I'll be putting things together, looking
Mhm.
at radar, satellite, what the teams need, what the clients need, and then I'll send out those forecasts. I try to do that as quickly as possible, get that to them so they have them.
Mhm.
And then I'll sort of go into okay, now I need to look at things for Colorado. So I go through that phase. I look at things so I know what I'm thinking when I get in. And I get into work about 6:30-ish.
Wow.
So everything happens fast. I get in and then got to get the other work done, admin work for the show. Then the show is on roughly from 9 to 10 and then sometimes around noon, 12:30. And then I'm done. In the afternoon, I do a lot of web work, these YouTube videos when I can. And then I go home 3 or 4 o'clock and usually I get a workout in of some sort, see how my wife's doing, of course. And then, just finish up for the day, see what people need. And then that's it.
That's 5 days a week.
It
Wow.
is.
So you're used to big days every day,
Yeah.
2:30 a.m. wake up call for 15 years. That
Yes.
is impressive.
It was brutal. And honestly, I had to, I was like, guys, I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
It's too hard on me. And so luckily I don't do that anymore, but it was fun while it lasted.
But and so you get to sleep until 5 a.m. now,
I do.
which for most people would be
I'm
still
telling you,
damn early.
it's a whole different world. The difference between 2:30 and 5 is huge.
Oh man, I can't imagine. I mean, if 5 in the summer, even you might even be getting like a little bit of daylight creeping in, even.
I know.
So that's a whole other world. Well, thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
so, what the hell is forensic meteorology? I know that you're
Okay.
involved in it. You got to tell
Yeah.
us what this is and how you're involved and what you do, and maybe an interesting case.
Well, this was accidental. It started, I don't know how long ago, but I had a lawyer. Actually, it started with hail claims.
Mm.
So This insurance company contacted me and they said, hey, I knew this person who ran this company. And they were like, we're getting these claims for this severe hail that hit this part of Denver on this day. Did this actually happen? And how bad was it? So I looked back in, I sort of reconstructed things and I'm like, yeah, this is legitimate. There was softball-sized hail or something in this subdivision, and it just hammered these houses. And then I was like, well, that's really interesting. Like, that's kind of I didn't even think about this whole new avenue of combining meteorology with insurance. But then it turns into, I get a call from a lawyer, and they're like, hey, we've got this slip and fall case. Is this legitimate? How do we counter the prosecution? And so I had to look back and see, okay, there was snow on that day. What were the temperatures preceding it? Could there have been black ice? Was there any melting? What was the sun doing? So you kind of have to look back in time and reconstruct the weather on that date. And then that sort of just led to other cases from lawyers. And I know a few of them around town, and they'll use me to be an expert witness, to give my opinion, to construct what the weather was. And I'll give you a case example. So out at DIA, Denver International Airport, some planes, you have to walk down onto the runway to get on the plane now.
Okay.
So that puts you in the weather. So think about, you have people in wheelchairs, you have people with walkers, you have people who just have trouble walking, right? They have to walk down on the runway, if it's snowing, and then get on the plane. Some people fall, and there are slip and fall cases. So I've dealt with slip and fall cases. That's a lot of what I deal with is, did it really snow on this date? How bad was the snow? What were the temperatures? And what's your opinion? Could it have been icy? That's what I deal with a lot.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I love it because as a general public, when we hear the word forensic, we're thinking CSI, the television shows, that where people are going back in time and trying to reconstruct this crime. And did this happen this way, or was it something else? And this sounds pretty one-to-one. It's exactly what you're doing, just in a weather sense. Did the ice commit a crime against this person, making them slip and fall? So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks for explaining that, because I thought that's so interesting. I never even heard of that before.
Man, you've done your research. You know all about me.
That's the hardest part of these is the research. And I get nervous for these, and I still have anxiety around the podcast. This is like my 75th one. Yeah. So I'm obviously getting more comfortable, but once I have the script written, my anxiety drops. And then once I do a rehearsal with the script, because I make a lot of changes, then it's like, I'm chill. And then I come in, because the prep, if my brain completely explodes, I can just read the next line. It's like, I have no idea. And because we edit it too, I can just be like, and that
give me a second. Like with my job in weather, it's all ad lib. So I don't script anything. I don't have to write anything.
I thought it was all teleprompter.
No. Only the news is, because the news is different. Weather is its own thing, and it's all unscripted. There's nothing there. I just have to make it up as I go.
So you have the model or the picture or whatever, and you're just like, it's going to snow here.
That's your script right there.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, cool, man. And that makes sense, right? Because if you have the knowledge and you've done your research that day, just seeing that image triggers you to roll into it. Oh, that's really cool, man. You add your 2 cents
to it.
So that's a cool piece that I wouldn't have asked. Yep. So because I just assumed that, of course, you're reading a script, a teleprompter, but especially like you said, because you actually have the meteorology degree and so you earn these certifications they called, and I don't know what these are, so please inform us, the CBM and the NWA seal of approval. What are these certifications, and why are they important in meteorology?
So they're mainly geared towards the television aspect, and they were made so that if you have that on the screen next to your name, people at home would know, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. He meets these certain standards in meteorology. Okay. But they also sort of, in the CBM in particular, you definitely have a higher standard, I think. And so if you have that one, you typically have gone to a college for 4 years at least and studied meteorology. It's kind of just about, does this person meet certain standards?
Great. So it's, in a way, it'd be like if you looked at a doctor and they had MD behind their names, like, all right, this person has the degree, they did the thing, so we can trust them. So great. Yeah. So for you, that's really important in your field to have those certifications.
Yeah, it is. And I've had those for many years, but I just forget about them. But it's like anything else. It also forces you to have continuing education, learning new things. It forces you to keep up on research, and because you have to earn these credits along the way to renew these seals and these certifications. And I like that. I read the new research anyway, but it does force you to do that.
That's right. And so that is similar to a medical doctor. You basically have continuing education, and and now the doctors have to take the boards again every couple of years.
Oh, do they really? I didn't know
they switched it. Yeah. So I have 2 dads. One of my dads is a doctor, and he's grandfathered in. So he doesn't. But the new doctors, I think every 5 years, they got to take more tests again,
Oh,
which is
interesting.
pretty
Okay.
gnarly. Are there any common misconceptions about mountain weather that you encounter?
Well, I do a lot of presentations and talk to a lot of groups. And one of the things that they always ask, so in Colorado, and this may be universal, I don't know, but in Colorado, I've noticed a lot of people here use the website mountainforecast.com.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be a really popular one here. And I think there's a lot of misconception in where that data comes from, or even,
Ooh.
on your phone. Where do the apps pull the data, and is it valuable?
Is there a human involved?
There is no human involved.
That's right.
Yeah, anything you get on your phone from like most of the apps, I don't want to say all of them because, we even have one for our station that we had to put together, but it's all automated. There's no human involved. So for mountainforecast.com, it just pulls from the GFS model. That's all it does. And
One model.
One model. It's just one run, one model, and it updates, I don't know, 4 times a day or something like that. So you have to understand that that's a very limited view of reality. And, there's hundreds of other possibilities, thousands really. So you really have to look at these and take them with a grain of salt, the apps. And I can tell you unequivocally, and I see it all the time on Denali and Everest, there are people that go up to Denali and rely on that website.
Oh, no.
Their family members will tell them, hey, the website's saying this. Because I remember I've dealt with many of these folks. There was a guy that had his dream trip up on the west ridge of Hunter. He was sitting there. I was telling him, hey, you've got a 3-day window. You got to go now. It's going to be great. But my family says that it's going to snow 19 inches. And I remember that number. It was 19 inches. And I said, it's not going to snow 19 inches. He sat there for 3 days in perfect weather because of what they told him. He took that information over what I was telling him. And that's not an isolated incident. That happens more than you could think. Miles, I'm telling you. I had people that pay me that sit up at 14,000 and they'll be like, but the whiteboard they're marking here at 14 says it's going to snow tomorrow. And I said, listen, you can do whatever you want, but I'm telling you, tomorrow is a summit day. And that's the kind of stuff that I deal with a lot, but is it reasonable? I guess it's reasonable, but I've done this for so long, you got to listen. I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
I think that's one of the points I really wanted to make.
No, that's a great point because, and I'm curious, just from a personal consultation, when I'm in Bariloche, Argentina, in northern Patagonia, we use Snow Dash Forecast, which is the exact same thing.
Okay.
It's the same company, so it probably just pulling from the GFS.
Oh, I think I've seen that. Okay.
Yeah, and because they don't have a meteorological organization in that country, so you're not going to get like a NOAA type, a National Weather Service type forecast that got humans and is great. So what I've worked on is now I use Meteo Blue, which basically compares all the models next to each other with nice little icons, but even that doesn't work good. So for the common person like me that is trying to get a forecast maybe in a strange location like that in Argentina, are there any public tools that you recommend?
I've had some people ask me this in Europe. In the United States, the Weather Service has those point forecasts that you can click on different locations. Those are decent, right? It's a great way to pack your bag or plan your trip or whatever. Outside of the United States, man, it is a whole different ballgame.
It's tough out there.
And so, we have our global models that we can use. I've got a whole notebook at home with the tools that I've used on Everest over the years and what models I've gone with and what data. And like I said, it kind of depends on what those people are seeing on the mountain. But it's hard. That's why when I forecast, I call it the forecast funnel. So I start with the big picture. I look at the satellite. I looked at the images coming off the satellite, look at the radar from like 30,000 feet. And then I'm kind of funneling my way down. Then I zoom into the range or wherever the client is at. And I'm looking at the winds. I'm looking at the upper level winds. What are they doing? Where are they coming from? And then I kind of zoom in and funnel down a little bit more. And I look at the temperatures. So I have this picture in my mind of the way that I see things and how it matches up to what they're telling me. And then from there, I'll decide on, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to do a mix of some high resolution modeling, or do I want to use a global model or a regional model, or what's going to work best? Is there a typhoon coming, a cyclone coming out of the Bay of Bengal? Then you got to use some sort of a high-res model. So it depends on each case. Like if you're down in Patagonia, GFS ain't bad down there. Like Aconcagua, it's not bad. But that would be your only source. I don't know what the Weather Service is named down there, if there even is one in South America.
They don't have a good one.
Yeah. You could do your Meteo Blue and compare the different ensembles.
Yeah, that's been my best answer I use WX.
Okay.
Just for our listeners, just some weather sites that could help you is WX has good pinpoint forecasts, and actually what it does just refers you to the GFS and forecasts or models like that. And then the Meteo Blue or Meteo Blue
Yeah.
multi-model, find that for where
Yeah,
you're
I've
going.
seen
That's
that.
nice because it just compares them next to each other, gives you icons if you're more of a layman, so you can kind of just line up these vertical columns. How many snow icons are in 9 a.m. and then you can
Yes.
get an idea. And then snowforecast.com, which you're saying is basically just the GFS.
Yeah.
What else do I use? That's about it. Oh, Windy. So
Okay.
Windy can be
Yep.
helpful too. And Windy's got some just beautiful displays that
Yeah.
at least
I've seen that. The
are very
streamlines
entertaining.
that kind of come across. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can kind of choose what you want to see. We use Windy a lot in Alaska at the heli skiing operation I work at. So that seems like something that seems people really like. And it'll do the same thing too. You can get the multi-model, sort of a bunch of models next to each other. So just in my layman's terms, those are some of the websites I use that have helped me, and they're all public and free.
Yeah, just from my corner, from my experience, when you try to stack up like 4 or 5 different models, sometimes the problem is one model says it's going to be clear on one day, but another one says it's going to snow that day. How do you know which one to believe? Let's say the GFS says it's going to snow for 3 days straight, but another model says it's going to be dry and sunny in between. That's where the magic is, right? That's where the art is. And that's where, someone like myself can add some value to what you're doing. Like, it is going to be sunny. It's not going to snow all 3 days. That's the value that I can add.
And that is hugely valuable. So I am curious about having you help me on some of my expeditions moving forward. So my democratic strategy with a multi-model might not be very scientific in the end, then, because I'm basically saying, there's 7 models being lined up against each other. If 4 of them say snow, it's probably going to snow. I'm basically just using democracy. Like, if there's more snows than suns, then it's going to snow. But maybe that's not the best strategy.
I think it'll work. I mean, not everybody has the time, the resources to sit down and spend hours or to keep a flow going in your mind of what's going on everywhere. So at some point, you just got to know, going to snow or is it going to not? Is it going to be sunny? Is the helicopter going to fly? Whatever. At some point, you got to just give me the forecast.
And some places are much more dynamic than others, to put it lightly. So when we're in Antarctica, even Alaska too, we always joke about our the best website for weather in Alaska and Antarctica is lookoutthewindow.com.
Yeah. Lookoutthewindow.com.
So we make plans obviously based on what little weather we get, but you really do got to wake up early, have a look around, check all the webcams and the models now.
Yes.
What's it saying now? Because the look out the window is often the best forecast that we get.
A place that you want to go that you haven't skied yet?
Greenland.
Okay.
So I'd be really curious about weather there because, we tried, I work for ISAC's expeditions when I guide, and I'd probably go with them. And I think we do the East Coast. But yeah, I mean, Greenland, really far north, big oceans, lots of weather, big tall peaks. So I bet getting the weather up there is really tricky. So someone you would come in really handy.
I just worked for 2 guys. Who basically snow kited the whole continent. And they made a couple of stopovers. They had skis with them too. So they skied and climbed some unnamed peaks there in Greenland. It took them 30 or 40 days. So they started on the southern end and they snow kited all the way up to like where they portaged out. It was like 40 days up.
Wow.
That was an adventure. I mean, there were a few blizzard days where they had to batten down the hatches, but then they had some beautiful days, where it was just cold and blue sky, and they were climbing these peaks that nobody else had even been on. So it was pretty cool.
What kind of temperatures were they dealing with?
It was pretty mild along the coast, but once they got into the interior, higher up on the glacier, some days were 20 below Fahrenheit.
Oh, wow. That's cool. It was probably springtime when they were up there. So
yeah, I'm trying to think of when it was, but it was definitely cold in the interior.
Wow. Are there any emerging technologies that you're particularly excited about?
Let's talk about this. So AI, right? So AI is this big thing now. So you have all of the models that we put the physics into. That's sort of the deterministic model that we call it. Now we have all these AI models coming into the equation that they don't use any equations. They don't use any of that stuff. All they do is they look back at what the weather has done like over the past 30 years. They look at the patterns.
Interesting.
It's the craziest thing to think about. Okay, so they take into account what the patterns have been, the climatology for a location, and that's how they spit out their forecasts. So when you get down to it, there's this thing called the black box problem with AI. We kind of know what they're doing, but we just don't know how they reach the solution. We don't know how the AI is getting the answer.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem, right? I mean,
Yeah.
do I send a message to somebody on Denali and give them an AI forecast?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's walking on a really tough space because I'm not sure. I'm sure it's going to perform okay, but how did it get the answer? I don't know. So AI is a really emerging part of this,
Mm-hmm.
and they're really fast. These models, they run so fast because they don't have
Wow.
to deal with all the equations and all that kind of stuff. So that's a big area right now.
That's fascinating. And so you alluded to it, but the results, the forecasts that AI is making are good.
Yes, they seem to be good. In fact,
Okay.
there have been comparisons and studies, and they're pretty close. But I think one of the areas that they suffer in is when you have extreme pattern changes. Because when you look back in history, weather is mainly in North America a west wind most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when you bring in a big storm system, that changes, that the jet changes. So how do they perform around the edges and the margins with big weather? I think
Mm.
there's still some questions about that, but so far they seem to be doing okay.
But that is interesting because the anomalies are the most important
Yes.
pieces, right? That's where there's
Yes.
property damage. That's where there's loss of life and things that really matter to us as human beings.
And
Where
they had some
AI,
good performance this summer. They were using AI to do hurricane forecasting. When we had, so many hurricanes. They
mm-hmm.
were using it to track Milton and then the hurricane that ran up through the Carolinas. And some of these models actually perform pretty darn good.
No, that's great. Well, exciting then, right? So you maybe don't have full trust in them yet. What do you think it would take to get your trust?
I just have to use it more. Yeah. And I was trying to use one almost every day during hurricane season just to
Mm-hmm.
see why it was doing what it was doing and why it was tracking the way it did. So I think it's just a matter of time. But I have no doubt that they will be adopted and they will be used. I'm not sure to what level the Weather Service, which tends to be a leader in this area, what level they've incorporated AI yet into their forecasts. So I don't know what the timeline is for this.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's probably the correct answer for any and all things AI right now.
Sure.
So I think that let's wait and see, right? Because like everything, it's new. We need to test it and probe it and see how it performs over time.
Yes.
Uh, is there any forecast that sticks out in your mind? Maybe the most challenging forecast you've ever had to make?
Yeah, I mean, there's two, and they're both clients. One client was on Everest. The other
Hmm.
client was on Denali. So
Hmm.
the Everest one, the guy on Everest, at the time, I was using this model, and I thought for sure he was going to be able to go up and summit. He was going to miss the summit crowd, the summit push. Well, he went up there. I mean, it was just horrible. The jet was sitting on the summit, and I kept messaging him. I said, it's got to pull off here at some point. It's got to move. It's got to move." And
Hmm.
it didn't. And it finally moved, but they had to spend like a full day up there at Camp 4, which is just horrible. It's like the death. It is the death zone.
26,000 feet.
Yeah, it did let up, and part of his clients did go to the summit, but I felt horrible.
Oof.
Like that's the whole point of what I'm doing. I'm
Hmm.
trying not to put people in that situation. So
Right.
I'll never forget that. And it taught me some valuable lessons. The
Hmm.
other one was up on Denali, and it was all about the wind as well. The team had moved to 17 camp, and it looked to me like the winds would be lightning and they would be able to go to the summit. But in all honesty, the winds never did let up. And again, and my mistake was I locked in on this one model and I didn't listen to what they were saying enough because the two weren't matching. So I was I wasn't listening to what they had to say.
Really interesting. Wow. And people probably understand this, but the wind is sort of the most dangerous thing at
Definitely.
altitude. So
Because it
it's
will kill you so fast. You can layer up to a certain point,
mhm.
but then even, the wind's blowing 80 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, and the temperature's 20 below. There's nothing
Mhm.
you can do.
Yeah, and quite simplistically, it literally just is removing the heat from your body at a very efficient, very high rate.
Yeah.
And like when I was on Denali, we spent 10 days at 14,000 feet because of the wind. And clients don't understand, but like you go up there. And actually, on my birthday, June 25th, we did try. We went up the fixed lines to 16, whatever. And at the top of those lines, it was just
It was just blowing.
raging. And we went right back down because it's once you understand it, it's easy to be conservative about the wind at
Okay.
altitude because it is terrifying. Like, what's next for you? What's next for you and your journey? Anything you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I can feel some changes on the horizon for me.
Mm,
I'm not 100% sure what those are going to be, but I really have enjoyed doing these forecast videos for
mm.
YouTube. So I will continue that. I really enjoy that. I love the feedback from those videos. On my professional job, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll go in a different direction. I don't know what that's going to be. I haven't decided. And I will continue doing forecasting for clients around the world, climbing peaks. I really love that. And skiers as well. I'll continue doing ski forecasts. I'll continue doing what I'm doing with some changes along the way. And I don't have any plans of leaving Colorado at this point. I really still enjoy the lifestyle here. I would love to get out on another climb. Maybe I've always wanted to go and go with my friends over to the Himalaya. So maybe at some point I'll try to go over there and do that and maybe forecast while I'm over there and kind of combine the two. That's possibly on the horizon.
That sounds cool. We're all really excited to see what changes you make following your career as you go. And yeah, please keep doing the YouTube videos. Yeah, I think we put 5 or 6 of those a week on Snowbrains.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, Miles.
Well, they're so good, man. They're so detailed, and you don't have to do 2 a day, but man, when you do, it's so cool to see the differences from the morning to the evening. And even like right now, I'm about to jump in my car and zip over to Alta and see how hard it's snowing.
And I love that. But what's crazy is this opportunity, it never existed back before maybe 2010. I don't know. But I was on television, but I never had any concept of making videos for YouTube. And now I find it satisfying. It's amazing how things have just changed. Like you can never see around the next corner. You don't really know what's coming. You can guess. And this is one of those things. And it's been really nice.
Well, and it's just so cool because, my understanding is when you do television, you're speaking to a broad audience. Yeah. But when you do these mountain weather forecasts, you're speaking to basically skiers and riders. Yes. So you get to really have this channeled voice to a very small group of people that understands and cares a lot about this one thing, as you do as well. And that synergy there is pretty magical. Yeah. Chris, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom here about weather with us today. Anything else you want to share here at the end of the show?
No, man, this has been awesome. Miles, thanks for having me on. I love talking about weather. Could do it forever. So go out, have a good time at Alta. Enjoy it. Hopefully that we can crank out some snow there.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I'll let you know. I'll send you a message and let you know.
Let me know.
But thanks again, Chris, for your time and energy today. I know you're super busy. Have a great rest of the day. And if I ever make it out to Colorado, I'll ping you. And if you make it out here, ping me. Let's go skiing.
Let's absolutely do that. And I mean it. I would love that.
Let's do it, man. I'm all in.
Thanks, Miles. I appreciate that.
You bet. Have a great day. Thank you so much for listening to the Snowbrains podcast. If you like this podcast, please share with friends and family, and please make sure to subscribe. To find out more about Snowbrains, please visit us at snowbrains.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and more.
This episode of the Snowbrains podcast is brought to you by Club Med. Ditch the hassle and embrace the freedom of an all-inclusive ski vacation with Club Med. Their resorts in the European Alps and Canada offer the perfect blend of exhilarating skiing, exceptional service, and worry-free pampering. Enjoy having lift tickets, delicious meals, lessons for all ages, and endless après-ski fun, all included in one price. While the kids are having a blast at the supervised children's clubs, you can focus on mastering your skiing skills and creating unforgettable memories on and off the slopes. Visit www.clubmed.us or call 1-800-CLUB-MED or call your travel advisor to experience skiing without limits. This episode of the Snowbrains podcast was edited by Liam Abbott. Music by Chad Crouch. And I'm your host, creator, and director, Miles Clark.